my relationship with my parents soured, I had to move out, and I struggled to find a stable place to live. At first, I stayed with friends and slept on their couches, but that wasn't a long-term solution. I browsed through various apps and websites dedicated to finding apartments and roommates until I came across an ad that intrigued me. A man named Luke was offering to rent a room in his one-story, three-bedroom house for $200 a month. Since he would also be living there, he would be both my host and roommate. The ad emphasized that he was often not home, so the tenant would be on his own. The ad also had some clear rules written in big letters: no parties, no large gatherings, no drinking in the living room, and no access to the basement. These rules seemed perfectly reasonable to me. I arranged to visit the house and meet Luke. Upon meeting him, I sensed that he was somewhat withdrawn. His quiet and slightly awkward demeanor caught my attention as he showed me around the house. He was nervous, his voice shaking and sometimes stuttering. The house had an open floor plan. The kitchen, living room, and dining room were all connected to each other, making it feel spacious. The bedroom was spacious enough, and the rent was reasonable for the neighborhood. During the visit, Luke reiterated the rules, emphasizing that the attic and basement were strictly off-limits and only used for storage. This seemed fair to me, and I immediately agreed to move in. We shook hands, and 2 days later I moved in without signing any lease. It was a regular month-to-month arrangement. I settled in quickly. The furnished bedroom made it easy to move in. All I had to do was unpack my clothes and arrange a few personal items. The room had a lock, which Luke had pointed out by giving me a key so I could guard it when he wasn't around, and I immediately appreciated the gesture. Luke never talked about his profession, limiting himself to mentioning that he wasn't usually home. I soon discovered that wasn't true, however, as his car was often parked in the driveway when I returned from work. Soon I began to hear disturbing noises at night. Footsteps, doors constantly opening and closing. One night when I went to the bathroom, I noticed the door to the basement was ajar. Curious, I walked down the stairs, saw a dim light in the far corner, and heard a knock. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. Wondering what he could be doing, I was startled when the sound stopped and Luke suddenly appeared at the bottom of the stairs, looking at me with a clearly annoyed expression on his face. I quickly apologized, explaining that I was just heading to the bathroom. In response, he curtly ordered me to close the basement door. Feeling uncomfortable, I complied, hurried back to my room, and spent the rest of the night awake, my mind spinning with questions about what he was doing in the basement. About a week later, when I returned home, I found my bedroom door unlocked, which heightened my suspicions and fears about the situation I was living in. Every day before I left, I always checked to see if my room was locked, so when I came back and found the door unlocked, I was immediately alarmed. Upon inspecting my room, nothing was missing, but it was obvious that someone had gone through my things. The clothes in my dresser were disheveled, and the closet door was slightly ajar. It was clear that Luke had his own key and had broken into my room, which was a serious invasion of my privacy and a violation of my rights as a tenant. Determined to deal with this, I approached his bedroom to meet his gaze, but received no response, even though his car was parked in the driveway. The situation became increasingly disturbing, and after a failed attempt to talk to him, I retreated to my room, cooked dinner in the microwave, and tried to relax watching TV. Later, I heard Luke's door open. Seizing the moment, I confronted him as he hurried out. The expression on his face was impassive, and he flatly denied entering my room. I calmly explained that my door was unlocked and things had been disturbed, but he insisted that only I had the key and abruptly left. His reaction left me in a daze. Feeling isolated, I wanted to seek advice from my parents, but our strained relationship prevented me from reaching out to them. Instead, I went back to browsing home listings online, determined to find a new place to live. When I realized Luke wasn't home, curiosity took over and I decided to explore the basement. After making sure his car was gone, I cautiously opened the basement door. There were no light switches, so I used my phone's flashlight to climb down the creaky stairs to a small, dimly lit room with a poorly fitted rug and an old couch. The air was getting more musty by the minute, especially near the locked door in the corner, which smelled worse than raw sewage. I took a quick look around the room, noticing only the taped cardboard boxes, which I decided not to disturb. Feeling uneasy, I went upstairs and closed the basement door behind me. I stayed in my room that night and didn't hear Luke come back. He must have come back after I'd fallen asleep. I woke up to a chilling sound. The floor next to my bed creaked. When I turned on the light, I saw Luke looming over me. I shrieked, but he pushed me away and asked if I'd been in the basement. I shouted, "No! How did you get in here? I locked the door!" Then he asked if I was sure. Turning the table over, I shouted, "Did you come into this room when I wasn't home?" He flatly denied it and began to stalk toward the door. "Then how did you get in here?" I demanded. Demanded I. In the dim light, he raised his hand, holding nothing in it, and this puzzled me. Before he left, he said coldly, "I think you should look for other lodgings," and closed the door behind him. I immediately started packing. There was no way I was staying here another night. Furious, I knocked on his door and demanded half of the rent back, since I had only been here for 2 weeks. A minute later, he opened the door, holding out his hand with a small wad of $100 bills. Even this simple act of handing over money seemed creepy to me. I snatched up the $400 he offered me, less than I was owed, but I didn't care. I had to leave. An hour later, I was fully packed and out of there. I slept in my car that night. The next day, I went back to my parents' house. After I told them about the strange events, something changed, and they accepted me more openly. Although I moved out again a month later, the relationship between my parents and I improved greatly. If you decide to find a random roommate online, be cautious and trust your instincts after meeting him or her. When I was 23 years old, I had to move out of state for work. I still work for the same company, but now I'm back in my hometown and working in a local office. Initially, I needed an inexpensive place to live, so I posted ads looking for a roommate on various platforms including Facebook, Craigslist, Twitter, and neighborhood subreddit. Then Rob contacted me through Facebook. He had a room in a house that he owned outright. From the pictures and our interactions, he seemed like a pretty normal guy. My parents weren't thrilled about me living with a male roommate, but after a positive FaceTime conversation during which Rob gave me a virtual tour of his modest downtown home just 10 minutes from my office, I felt comfortable. He was pleasant, the price was reasonable, and his lodging policies seemed reasonable. He mentioned that the room was available right away, which was perfect for me. A week later, I went and met Rob at his house. He was shorter than I expected, about my height, but he was friendly, helped me carry my heavy bags, and escorted me to my furnished room that his friend had recently vacated. I swapped the pillows and sheets for my own and spent the rest of the day settling in. Rob was sociable and clearly tried to make me feel at home, but he wasn't overbearing. The next day, Sunday, Rob offered to show me around town. Not feeling particularly eager, but wanting to start off on a good foot, I agreed. He pointed out shopping centers, restaurants, and other local attractions. Afterward, he suggested lunch, which seemed too much like a date to me. I declined, stating that I wasn't hungry, but he suggested a drink instead. I politely declined, reminding him that I don't drink on work nights, but he kept insisting. Eventually, he gave in, but he was noticeably quieter and looked upset, which made the situation somewhat awkward. That week, as I focused on adjusting to my new job, everything at home was fine until a few days later, when I noticed that my laundry basket looked messy. Clothes didn't look the way I'd left them. Even more disturbing was discovering that a pair of underwear was missing. Despite searching my room thoroughly several times, it was nowhere to be found. I couldn't help but think, what if Rob was behind the missing laundry? At first, I dismissed the idea, not wanting to confront him without more evidence. Still, the incident made me wish my bedroom door had a lock. That weekend, I bought a doorknob with a lock at Ace Hardware and installed it while Rob was out so I could leave the house in peace. I had planned to tell Rob about it the next time I saw him, but he didn't come home that evening. Because of his erratic schedule, I didn't know when I would see him. Around 1:30 a.m., I was awakened by a loud knock on the door. It was Rob, who was calling my name in a disgruntled tone. Startled, I pretended to be asleep, suspecting he was upset about the new doorknob. The next morning confirmed my fears. Rob sent a series of messages demanding to talk after work. When I inquired if it was because of the doorknob, he confirmed and insisted that it be removed in the afternoon. There was a harsh, anxious tone to his messages. I apologized, explaining that I was going to tell him and hoped he would understand my need for privacy and safety. His response softened a bit, but remained firm. The original doorknob must be restored. Confused and frustrated by his answer and the realization that I had changed the knob without warning, I felt obligated to comply, even though his previous attempt to enter my room had frightened me. I changed the pen and gave the new one back to Ace. The situation escalated when one day, when Rob wasn't home, a young woman knocked on the door. She urged me to leave, informing me that Rob had several restraining orders filed against him from other women, naming him as a dangerous and known stalker. Shocked, I learned that she had been following me and had picked a moment when Rob was away to safely approach me. Gratefully, I took her number, thanking her for her courage. Now, truly alarmed, I began packing and looking for a new place to live, despite having paid Rob for the entire month. The woman's warning confirmed my worst fears, and I realized I had to act quickly to ensure my safety. I found a studio apartment across town at a slightly higher price and immediately contacted the advertiser, who confirmed that I could move in as soon as possible. Next, I needed to inform Rob and get a refund. I started packing up the car and texted him that I needed to move out the next day for family reasons. At first, he didn't respond. About an hour later, when he got home, he asked me about my message. I made up the most believable story I could, and Rob agreed to pay me back after a visit to the bank the next day. That news was a relief. However, about an hour later, he showed up at my door and asked if anyone had told me about him. I denied this, claiming that my departure was purely due to family circumstances. Although he seemed unconvinced, he eventually left without further comment. Tragically, the situation escalated that night. I awoke to find Rob sitting ominously at the foot of my bed. When I screamed, he quickly silenced me and whispered for me to calm down. He claimed he meant me no harm and thought someone had spoken ill of him. His demeanor became more and more disturbing as he began stroking my leg, trying to calm me down despite my obvious distress. I managed to get out of bed, rushed to the door, and ran outside where, hiding in the bushes, I immediately called the police. When they arrived, I explained everything. The police officers demanded that Rob come out and share his thoughts. While the police officers were there, I insisted that Rob wire me the money he owed me, which he did. The entire time they were there, he tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. One of the officers later told me privately that Rob had a history of arrests related to incidents with women, although he denied all charges, and it was all, he said, she said. I left the premises and spent the night in a hotel. The next day, I moved into a studio apartment, thanks to the landlord's understanding of my extreme need. This horrible experience definitively established me in the idea that I would never live with another man again, be it my boyfriend, husband, or any other stranger.